Hello, I'm Kelly O'Connell, attorney and author with Knockout Podcasts. I crave debate on politics, society, history, the arts, religion, and red-hot current dramas. Hang out with me and my intriguing guests while we examine our times. Hear my take and offer me yours. And please don't forget to subscribe. Hey, it's Kelly here. Hope you're doing well. And today was the day that the Chauvin trial ended, and the jury came back and they convicted him of second and third degree murder and also of manslaughter. And I don't want to talk about that other than to say he's got his day in court and now he's going to have some appeals. And I'm sure there's a lot to appeal on, but I think what really got him was the video. That was hard to overcome. There's a lot of people who are breathing a sigh of relief because there was no widespread rioting that I know of, despite the idiot Maxine Waters calling for it, essentially. But anyway, today's show related to this on the United States of propaganda, or how woke and PC culture replaced reality. And you know, it wasn't not too long ago America and the entire world were distracted by survival. Indeed. But now we've found out that woke isn't being awake. It's a nasty nightmare. For millennia, when humans fought for survival, they barely made it. In many cases, they didn't. Yet now that we have security, we find new ways to seek misery and failure. A political virus was injected into culture from Marx. It claims that a revolution is needed and that the powerful who have stolen from the weak have to be put under siege. And they have to, the weak have to be able to overtake their oppressors. And include in the weak, you include race and gender, and not just the poor, but foreigners and all kinds of different stuff. Now, instead of enjoying the prosperity that is our heritage from all of the hard work, when it's not being stolen from us and our technology by China, we're caught up in this battle. And socialist saboteurs are attempting to break down the U.S. and to rebuild us as a socialist paradise while outlawing conservatism, tradition, liberty, and religion as the religion of mankind takes its place. Now you might say, Kelly, that sounds like a little bit over the top. And I do agree that it's over the top, but it's really accurate, I think, because how else do you describe all of the terrible things that are happening? And so let me go through how we got here. And I think first we can talk about how do people get propagandized, but where did the propaganda come from? And political correctness is taken, it was a strategy taken from what they call the Marxist Frankfurt School. They were in Germany and they were in danger of getting wiped out by Hitler and the Nazis because their ideas were so similar. And so it was, Hitler was looking to cement his place in the culture. And so this Frankfurt School came over into New York and established itself, I think, in some way in conjunction with Columbia University. They figured out ways to get professors who were anti-American or pro-Marxist into schools, and everybody knows that that's the way it is now. Number one, they got it into Hollywood, and you remember the communism scare of the 1950s when so many people in Hollywood had been enchanted by communism, and it's still there now, but it's not really probably talked about as much. But these people who are advocates, these actors and producers, these great media personalities are now fighting for the left, obviously. It got into government, and I don't need to explain to you that people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Maxine Waters and all these other crazy politicians that are fighting to take over AOC, they're all essentially socialist in their thinking. And so They got into the court system, and now we see that we have a two-headed court system. The court system for the regular person, or for maybe the conservatives, and the court system for the elites. So that's why the people who went after Trump didn't get in trouble. Now we have it in the corporations, so that we've got Levi's and we've got other groups who are standing up to states telling them what laws they have to have, which is absolutely crazy, and I had never heard of it before this. So, how did it get into people? How did wokeness get into people? And how were we propagandized? And I would like to throw this out and present it to you as an explanation. And if you disagree, and I'm still working on my website, so if you disagree, I'm kind of try to find the place that you go and put your comments. But first of all, we lost our traditions and religion, and that happened slowly after decades. Now, there's been a lot of people in the American society that have been trying to drive out of the school system, but out of culture. First of all, Christianity, right? There's been an attack on Christianity, but after that, after Christianity falls out of the culture and becomes kind of ghettoized, then you've got these people that are fighting against America. Now, if you think about how they did this, attacking American history, calling the Founding Fathers slave masters and that type of thing, saying that we're not the greatest country in history, we're the worst. And it's very confusing for kids. Kids growing up now are being taught race theory. And race theory basically says that the white race is the worst race because they've been the most oppressive. So despite the fact that people from around the world still are trying to get over here so that they can have a piece of the American dream, many Americans here are working against America. And so what you've got going on now, and I had mentioned it in another show, but you've got the Democrats taking down the walls on the border and then pretending that nothing can be done about it. Biden finally admitted it was a disaster. You're having 200,000 people a month come in here, which is obviously 2 million a year, and 10% of those have COVID. So while the government says its number one goal is to fight COVID, they're letting in the equivalent of 250,000 COVID patients a year, and all of those people are in close proximity to each other because there's no room in these camps that they're putting them into, and so you're going to have an explosion of COVID out of these immigrants. Now, we lost our traditions and our religion, so there's no more prayer in the school, as you know. But you can't even really talk about government and religion anymore, and that's not what the founders wanted. So people have a void in themselves, and because we're not built to have a void, we're built to have strong beliefs, and we're built to have love of our culture and love of our country and love of our religion, of our God, and love of our neighbors and love of our families. And if you think about it, these have all been attacked because we had a void in us, and this is the whole culture. And so these kids are going into school, but especially the university, although now it's even the youngest kids are getting race theory, which is another type of Marxism. They're injected with the ideas when they're very vulnerable. You're vulnerable when you're young because the people who are around you, the adults who are around you, provide leadership, they provide role models. They teach us stuff, but they also inculcate us. They teach us deep truths. And so one of the deep truths they put out there is Marxism, which is just basically, if you want to boil it down, the rich steal from the poor. There's only so much money available in this society, and the rich get their money by stealing it from the poor, and that the purpose of the system, the purpose of life is basically to fight back against that, to help the poor, to help the weak, to help the sick, the downtrodden. Now, that's not true, but it is so intoxicating because it's essentially a false gospel. So the young are propagandized, and then these people go out into society. They're like foot soldiers, and they're going out in various professions, and they're trying to get other recruits. And now we get to the next phase, which is wokeness. And so where does woke theory come from? Well, it's another branch of Marxism, of course, and the model that Marxism puts out. And I got to say something to you, by the way. I am so reluctant to mention Marxism and socialism to anybody because it makes you sound, according to some people, like a fanatic. But there's a problem with not saying anything, and one of the problems is this is the source of all this stuff, is Karl Marx, but not just Marx. It was all the socialists who came out of the aftermath of the French Revolution and who were in Germany, and they were in Paris, and then they came over to England. That was Marx's story. It puts out a model that most people can understand. It is basically kind of like in the Bible when Christ uses parables. And he uses parables to teach people from kind of a general principles. And so Marx gave out general principles as well, but they were very toxic. And one of the things that Marx wanted more than anything was for a revolution to happen. And if you will see the things that are happening in our culture now, including all the rioting that has gone on for the last year and all of the wokeness, the cancel culture, and all these things, this type of thing is endemic in the history of Marxism, in the countries that were taken over by Marxism. And it is propaganda. It is propagandized out to people to accept it. So many people have been exposed to it unthinkingly, accept it. And I think the reason for that is because we have a natural inclination to have a religion or to have some sort of an operating program. Think of it kind of like your computer. You got to have something in your computer. It's Windows 7 or 8 or 10 or whatever. It becomes a default. And I think that's one of the reasons these people on the left, and I think especially in the media, are so self-righteous, is because they found the truth. And it's like dealing with an ex-smoker, It's just kind of fanatical belief. And I think for another reason, too, is because so many people now are unchurched. About a quarter of the population now says they don't identify with a religion. And so that quarter of the population are especially vulnerable. Now, if you're a Christian or you're a Jew or even a Muslim or something like that, you have a belief system that's already in place, and you use that. And human beings need a belief system so that they can evaluate and decision make. And so what's happening now is we're kind of transitioning from a Christian tradition into a secular one. So during the Enlightenment, that was an attempt to transition societies and people from a religious-based mindset to a scientific one. And it didn't completely work because human beings will always need some level of religion. Now, in wokeness, you're kind of picking up this, it's not just a belief system, it is, it's also, you're kind of going into battle, or you're going into the military. It's militant. And so I'm going to give you some examples of wokeness, and just kind of bounce it off your mind, and I'm sure that you can. And if I was on live radio, by the way, you'd be calling in and telling me examples that I would probably be thrilled to hear about in terms of illustrating the point. Number one, Bill Gates wants to block the sun. He wants to put something in the atmosphere to block the sun. Now, that's because of global warming, and that is one of the beliefs of the left. Now, for those of you who say, well, it's just science, Kelly, why don't you wake up and taste the coffee? Why don't you, get your head straightened around? Actually, it's not just a scientific theory. It is also a theory about life that also incorporates Marxism, believe it or not, very quickly. They were originally setting things up so that the rich countries would have to buy carbon credits from the poor countries, and so it would circulate a lot of cash to the poor without any real activity going on, if you see what I mean. So, in any event, Bill Gates wants to throw up something in the atmosphere to reduce the heat. Now, number one, what if that goes wrong? What if it's some sort of a disaster? And you might say stuff like that never becomes a disaster, but I would beg to differ. Number two, what if the theory of global warming is wrong? What if the science is wrong? We know it's been falsified. That's not even my point here, though. It's just to show you examples of how we are beholden to these theories in such a way that we've got this madman, this billionaire, who's willing to shoot stuff up in the sky. And what if he creates an ice age? This guy, who's worth, what, $150 billion and has given away $100 billion? What if he's wrong? What if it's a mistake? What about all the people around the world? Shouldn't people be able to vote on this, whether they want him to shoot stuff up into the air? It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. Number two, woke mobs. What is a woke mob? Wokeness is trying to train people not just to be politically correct in terms of gender, and in terms of race, and in terms of handicap, or fill in the blank. There's a million categories. And so what they're trying to do is not just get people to believe, but these people who believe are then put in a mind frame that they are ready to challenge others who are not woke. A person who makes an unfortunate comment about race, or they said it 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Somebody videotapes themselves listening to a rap song and says the N-word, and they're not black. Well, that gets dredged up at some point when they're in a prominent position, and that is used to get rid of the person out of the society. So that's what these woke mobs do. There's ad hoc woke mobs that would appear if someone broke the rules in popular society, and they really want this to happen. It's so scary. Maxine Waters telling people, if you see anybody from the Trump camp, you go up, you get in their face, and you tell them you're not welcome here. Now, how in the hell Maxine Waters has the right to tell anybody else they're not welcome somewhere, especially when she's traveling from California over to Wisconsin to try to encourage rioting? It's insane, and that lady should be taken out of government. But trans kids, and there's a couple of different things here. Number one, younger and younger children are being encouraged or being taken, and they are being dressed and treated as the opposite sex, and then they are even being given drugs that block hormone from your body so that you don't develop your body as an adult, or your genitals of the opposite sex that you want to be. And one person who did this is this lady. She's an actress. She's from South Africa, and I have to Google her name here. But let me look for it real quick. But she took her kid at 3 years old, and she started dressing the kid. It was a little boy. She started dressing the little kid as a girl, and now South Africa actress, and she'll come up. Charlize Theron has two black little boys. One came from America, one came from South Africa. One of them, I think his name was Kevin or something like that. She took the child and she began to, for something the child said, she started dressing it as a little girl. She has no training. And you know what I found out? Of course she doesn't have a degree of any kind, so she's not a psychologist. But she's nuts. Her mom shot the dad right in front of her, murdered the dad. Now, they said it was in self-defense, but I mean, that's the kind of person. She doesn't have a spouse. So you've got this huge group of people. This is what has happened in the society. We've transitioned to a society where parents are irrelevant. Masculine parents, male parents are irrelevant, and we've bought off on it. We've bought off on it on a huge scale. So trans kids, how fair is that? They say a lot of girls, especially who've transitioned to males, now regret it. And, some of them have had operations or they've taken in male hormones. They can never go back to who they were. But you've also got trans kids that are competing in female athletics in high school and not just beating the pants off them, of course, but they're also taking their scholarships away and their ability to go into school. That, in and of itself, that one example proves the entire movement is wrong because it's so patently unfair. We're looking for, the term is egalitarianism, equality at every level. But by using that on one side, you bring in ultimate unfairness on the other side. And it turns out that you could destroy all female athletics if you followed this out to its logical conclusion, right? I mean, why wouldn't you? Okay, woke corporations. Corporations have been dabbling in advocacy for 5 or 10, 20 years. Now they're coming in whole hog. Major League Baseball goes to Georgia and says you can't have the law that you've just passed. Now, it never went to court. There was no vote on whether it was constitutional or not. And the laws that we accept or don't accept have to do with the Constitution, right? But they just came in and said you can't have this law if you want us to do business with you. So Coca-Cola, which is centered, I believe it's centered in Atlanta, and I know that there's some big corporations over there. Delta Airlines is also fighting back. And you might say, what purpose is a large corporation, a massive corporation, what purpose do they have to, Levi Jeans, for example, what right do they have to go in and tell a state what laws it can have? And it just shows you how crazy it's gotten. And when will it end? Anti-white. I'll just throw this out there. Are white people bad by being born white? I mean, isn't that just as bad as saying black people are awful and evil because how they were born? It's stupid. We're getting rid of due process in a lot of these situations where a person accuses another individual of having done something that's against the PC code, against the woke code. And these people like this have been taken and kicked out of organizations or fired without any proof. And it has happened. It happens on a fairly regular basis that they find out later that the person made it up. So they're not given due process. They're not given the right to clear themselves. They're not given the right to gather evidence to show that they're telling the truth and the person who's accusing him is not. That alone destroys the legal process. All right, cancel culture in and of itself. You find somebody that you disagree with, and then you go and you attack them, and you get other people to attack them, and you let them know that the school or the business that they're at, the corporation, you let them know that if they don't get rid of this person, you're going to create chaos. And I mean, what kind of a culture is that? Whatever happened to freedom of speech, freedom of belief? And so you've got so many other examples out there. But so what am I getting at? What I'm getting at is we have to go back to what made this country great, the rule of law, which is not just laws. It's that the laws apply to everybody, and that the way that the laws are applied through the rules and procedures, they're fair too. And if everybody's under the same law, from king to pauper, from president to blue-collar worker, then you can have a good country. But if the president of the United States, if his son gets special treatment, and if you know that he was working for foreign governments or in foreign corporations making millions of dollars and doing nothing, and in the Ukraine, Hunter Biden was working for Burisma, I believe, he was on a board in a country that he didn't live in, number one. Number two, in a language that he didn't speak. Number three, in a sector of the economy in which he had literally zero training in. So how much did he earn his pay? Well, and how did he earn it? He earned it because his dad was the vice president. but he's getting he himself and his company, and he was the company, were getting, I think, $175,000 a month. And he says he doesn't regret it. So the rule of law, and then our liberties, our rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to have a gun to protect yourself, a right, if you're accused, to have a trial and to be able to confront your witnesses and hear their story. So all of these things are getting taken away from us, and we've been propagandized. And so what's missing in the schools is teaching and logic. A person's not educated unless they know how to think for themselves. They cannot possibly think for themselves if they haven't been trained how to do it. So how do you teach logic? Well, you start out when somebody's young, and, you teach them little things like if A, then B, if B, then C, A, therefore C. You teach them fallacies. If somebody criticizes something that you did and your response is, well, don't worry about it, fatso, a personal attack. Our kids need to be trained in all of this stuff so that they can educate themselves. The purpose, the entire purpose of education is to put you into a place where you can become organized and disciplined. That's part of education. But that you can go and find information and consume the information, decide what is true and what's not, or at least get an idea of what is accurate in it and what isn't, what's proved and what is not proved. And so so you're able to talk to other people and understand them, but that you're not a propaganda puppet like so many people in this culture. If you see them, they're full of woke ideas. And, somebody one day just said, we need something that's called woke. We need to focus on race or gender or whatever. And we need to attack other people with this. And if you disagree with us, then we're going to destroy your life. Somebody came up with that idea. That's not necessarily a natural thought. And before we were woke, we were a lot happier in the United States. Correct? Of course it's correct. So, there's all kinds of crises that are going on right now. I would list them as, number one, there's a religious crisis because, a lot of people have no faith anymore, and they're, 1/4 of the population doesn't have any beliefs in that area, and they're a prime target for propaganda and secular propaganda, number one. Number two, we've lost our virtue in this culture, and that's why so many people grow up without two parents, and they don't have stability, they don't have emotional stability, and they don't have, intellectual or material stability. They don't have the wise leadership of two adults. And so the kids that grow up without a father are disastrously less equipped. And the rates of suicide and being institutionalized, incarcerated, mental health, substance abuse, to have their own multiple family units or whatever, multiple, children with other partners, all of that is through the roof. And I think we need to figure out what virtue is and go back and start teaching it to children, because if you want to be virtuous in this culture, you are encouraged to think of yourself as trying to become some sort of a hero, and you become a hero by becoming woke. And I think a reason that a lot of people are getting into this, and especially a lot of celebrities, a lot of famous people are doing it, is you don't have to be a good person to be woke. All you have to do is memorize what is the important, the whatever you want to call them, shibboleths, but you can't speak down about race, and you have to be careful how you treat other races and genders and everything. And there is no talk about being virtuous. There's no politeness in this culture, if you haven't noticed it. And the sense of entitlement. There's so many people that I meet every day that are, they're totally convinced, but it's within their mind, deeply in their mind, that there's stuff that they want and they need, and they are owed that stuff. They're not being taught that you go work, you get a job, or you go to find something that you need, you work for it, and you go get it. And that's where self-esteem comes from. That's where pride comes from. Good pride. Is you go and do these things, and in this culture, you're supposed to be, I'm an attorney. Somebody comes in and needs help. Somebody finds out that I'm an attorney. I should donate my services. Why? Well, they don't even really work out why. And it's the same thing with politeness. Politeness has disappeared. So everything is a transaction. Everything is, it's kind of grim. In the old days when people were friendly and said hi to one another and were helpful and well-meaning and everything, those days are gone. And I think we need to fight to go get them back. And if it means becoming a religious country again, what's wrong with that? And if it means getting disabused of having a communist or a socialist or a Marxist or a leftist or a progressive or a liberal viewpoint, so be it. Let's bring logic back into school. Let's have some sort of a basic training in religion in the school, like they do in Britain. But the situation that we're in right now, it's very perilous, and there's a lot of good people out there who realize that their children are being taught about race theory, and that America is systemically racist, and that our history is bad, and we were slaveholders, etc. The first black person to live here came with a Plymouth plantation on the Mayflower, and his race was Blackamoor. He was a black man from Britain, and he came to live in the Plymouth plantation. He was not a slave. So what do you think about that? I mean, that's the foundation of America. It's not later when all these people brought in these slaves. But did you know slavery was, to a large extent, and for hundreds of years before the Europeans got into it, it was a undertaking by the Islamic world, and to this day Islam has never illegalized, has never banned slavery. It's never officially banned it. And they took out of Africa some unbelievable number of slaves, and 90% of them died on the route. And I've got books on this, by the way. And actually, I'll try to find a title here for you. But they took slaves out, and they were mostly interested in female slaves for their harems. And so it was mostly young black women who were put into chain gangs to lead them out of Africa, and then they died on the way. So 90% of them died. Tremendously sad. So I'll just get the name of it for you next time, but I think it's something along the line of Islam and slavery. Well, all right, so I tried to squeeze everything in that I could. I think the goal of the left is to have a guilt-free life and to be established in some sort of a quasi-religious way, and to establish yourself by learning the rules, so that you can be self-righteous and condemn other people and flog other people. But it's really created a sugar cube world in which the first serious rainstorm is going to wash it all down the drain. Anyway, Kelly O'Connell, thanks for tuning in. If you have anything you'd like me to talk about, please send me a note. And my email, info@kellyolaw.com. That's KELLY OLAW, one word, .com. Have a great evening, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Ciao. Well, thanks for listening in. Tune in tomorrow for a new podcast on a sizzling topic or download one of my classics. Be blessed, and catch you soon, Kelly and the gang at Knockout Podcast.